Let's go already. I feel like I just wasted my time in this store, said Andrea, before discreetly slipping a small wallet into the tote bag Bea was carrying at that moment. They had just reached the door when suddenly the alarm near the entrance buzzed, an alert that someone had taken something without paying. Because of the commotion, security guards quickly approached. "Ma'am, sorry, but we need to check your belongings," said the security guard as he reached for Bea's tote. "What's the problem, sir?" Bea asked immediately. Before the guard could respond, his partner had already spotted something inside Bea's tote. Without hesitation, they grabbed Bea by the arm. She looked completely surprised and visibly afraid. "Sir, hold on a second," Bea began. "Oh my God, Bea, I knew you'd pull something like this if I brought you to a fancy place like this," Andrea declared dramatically, causing Bea to turn to her in disbelief. "You're such a klepto." Andrea hadn't even finished speaking when the guards also took hold of her wrists and began putting her in handcuffs, just like Bea. Her eyes widened in shock as she looked at the guard holding her. "What the hell are you doing? Are you stupid? You saw who took it, right?" Andrea snapped at him. "Why are you handcuffing me too? Do you even know who the hell I am? Take these off or I swear I'll have you arrested." "Ma'am, you were with the suspect, so you're part of the incident. Please cooperate peacefully to avoid further trouble," the guard replied. "I'll have you locked up for this," Andrea shrieked, still struggling. Meanwhile, Bea quietly agreed to go with the police without resistance, while Andrea kept fighting, her loud voice echoing through the transport van until one of the officers lost his patience with her. They finally arrived at the station, and everyone in the room turned their attention to Bea as she stepped inside. "Ma'am, are you okay?" asked one woman, prompting everyone to glance at Bea, who simply sighed in response. "You, help me remove these handcuffs. What were you people even thinking?" said the woman sternly. "But ma'am, she stole something," said one of the guards. "She stole? Are you out of your mind? Do you want to lose your job today?" the woman snapped, leaving the police officer no choice but to obey her orders. "What are you doing? Why are you letting her go?" Andrea protested. Regardless of Andrea's complaints, the officers proceeded to remove the handcuffs from Bea. "Where's my granddaughter?" a commanding voice called out, prompting everyone in the room to bow their heads once more. "This is Mr. Hope, your bestie, here with another banger. Let's rewind a little bit to the beginning of the story. They say you don't need a lot of money in your pocket to be truly happy. All you really need are the simple things: family, friends, and people who understand and will stand by you in times of need. In a world filled with noise and chaos, perhaps simplicity is the only way to find peace. But what if your past comes chasing after you? What would you do?" "Bea!" called out her friend loudly, snapping her out of her thoughts. She had no choice but to playfully cover her ears as she turned toward her friend, Gabby, who was approaching their vegetable stall. "You didn't come to the park last night. What a shame. There were so many hot guys," Gabby teased as she reached her, causing Bea to roll her eyes with a smirk. "Our favorite band came to town for once, and you didn't even see them because of your overly good girl ways." "I'm not overly good, okay? And I really wanted to go," Bea answered, while neatly arranging vegetables on the table. "The thing is, Grandma didn't let me. It was getting late. You know I can't leave her alone in the cabin. Something might happen to her while I'm gone. I wouldn't be able to live with myself." Gabby just pouted in defeat, especially when Grandma Desiree, who had just arrived and overheard the conversation, chimed in. "Bea is right," Grandma said. Gabby instantly jumped and yelped when Grandma Desiree pinched her side. "So you're the one always sneaking out at night, huh? Turns out it's just you, you brat," Grandma scolded, shaking her head as she walked into the store. "If you want to mess up your life, don't drag my granddaughter into it," she added sharply. Gabby couldn't help but scowl at the old woman, while Bea stifled a laugh at her friend's expense. "Geez, Grandma, way to be dramatic. You act like I'm not your grandchild, too," Gabby replied before turning to Bea, who now shook her head with a grin, amused by the two. "Is that what you've been worried about, Bea? Looks like Grandma Desiree doesn't need your guarding. One pinch from her and any thief would run for their life," Gabby teased. That only earned her another pinch from Grandma Desiree. Because of their financial struggles, Bea had no choice but to give up her dream of going to college. She chose to work instead and help her grandma sell vegetables at the market. Grandma Desiree was already getting weak, and it was just the two of them left in life. So even though it was hard, and she felt a pang of envy seeing her friends continue their college education, Bea chose to stay and prioritize what was truly necessary: survival. She believed everything had its proper time. If now wasn't her moment, she trusted that it would eventually come, and she was willing to wait, no matter how long. "I think what I earned today is enough to help cover Mom's medication," she said as they walked back to the market. The sun was scorching hot, but thankfully they ran into a tourist on the road who quickly bought a bundle of their vegetables. Since sales were slow at the market lately, the two decided to go door to door, selling veggies to at least earn something for the day. "Is she doing okay now?" Bea asked, glancing at Gabby, who was still smiling. "I'm sorry I can't help much right now, Gabby," Bea said apologetically. "Grandma and I are also struggling with the bills. I don't even know how we'll pay for her maintenance meds." Gabby didn't reply right away. She just smiled softly and grabbed her friend's arm playfully, which made Bea raise an eyebrow. Just from that grin, Bea could already tell Gabby was up to something again. "Don't worry, Bea. I'll collect from you next time, when you've got money," Gabby joked. Bea rolled her eyes with a smirk, and both of them laughed. After a couple of more minutes of walking, Gabby spoke again. "Life is so hard right now. Too many bills, too many problems. If only we could pick the kind of life we'd be born into." Bea scoffed and pouted at her friend. Gabby always had some silly thought in her head. "Even if we could choose the life we were born into, I'd still pick a simple one. As long as I'm with Grandma, I don't need anything else," Bea replied, still walking alongside her. "It's harder to be rich than you think, Gabby." "What? How would you even know, Bea? Have you ever been rich?" Gabby laughed. Bea didn't answer. "I'd rather be rich and cry with money in my hands than be poor and still suffer like this," Gabby added. Instead of arguing, Bea just shrugged. She knew Gabby wouldn't listen to her point anyway. She knew her friend's personality too well. Arguing would just drag on forever, and with Gabby's tendency to talk a mile a minute, their topic quickly shifted as they walked back toward their stall. When they reached their spot in the market, Bea wasn't even surprised anymore when Gabby excitedly told Grandma Desiree about the tourist lady who had bought their vegetables. "I don't even know if she was really a tourist," Gabby said, while Bea helped a customer pick out veggies. "We didn't ask her, but she looked like a newcomer here, looked pretty rich too." All Bea could do was purse her lips and listen as her friend chatted with her grandma. "She looked like someone I'd want to adopt me," Gabby joked. "I should ask her next time if she has a son I can marry so I can be an instant millionaire. I'd never have to work again." "She'd never accept you as a daughter-in-law," Bea snapped, making Gabby shoot her a look. "Just from the way she talked to us, you could tell she was educated. If she finds out how rude you are, she'd avoid you like the plague." "I know she'll like me, Bea. Can't I dream a little?" Gabby replied with a groan, making Bea laugh. "You've been ruining my ideas all day. Are you really my friend?" Gabby added dramatically, but Bea just chuckled. To be honest, Bea had gotten used to her friend. Sometimes she felt a bit envious of Gabby, because at least Gabby had dreams of getting out of poverty. Bea wanted that too, but even dreaming felt hard for her. She felt like she was just lying to herself if she did. She also wanted to escape their hardships, and give her grandma everything she deserved. But how could she even begin? "There you are again," said the smiling woman when she saw the two vendors. Bee and Gabby lit up the moment they spotted the same woman who had bought their vegetables a few weeks ago. But unlike before, they were now at the beachfront, carrying baskets of fresh produce. They'd ended up chatting and joking there after trying their luck selling to houses, which hadn't brought in much income. They figured maybe they'd have better luck by the beach. Just like them, the woman smiled broadly upon seeing them again. It was as if everyone already sensed where this meeting would lead. "It's so nice to see you again, girls. What are you doing here today?" the woman asked, removing her sunglasses and smiling warmly at the two who now beamed at her. "Are you selling your veggies here now?" "Yes, ma'am," Gabby answered, before nudging Bee, who shyly looked down. "Sales at the market haven't been good lately." "Oh, maybe you'd like to, she trailed off. Ma'am, maybe you'd like to buy again?" Gabby added with a nervous giggle. The woman puckered her lips slightly, then glanced at the baskets of vegetables they were carrying. Overwhelmed by her vacation experience the past week, she hadn't realized how much produce she had bought from the two girls. The vegetables were still sitting in her kitchen, but they had been kind and easy to talk to from the start. Even though she already knew what would happen, she found herself buying from them again anyway. "What are you planning to do with all those green beans, ma'am? Decoration?" teased one of her housekeepers. The woman smirked at her sarcastically. Back at her mansion, she and her staff were still organizing the vegetables she had bought earlier. Charo, 48, was a city businesswoman known for her generosity and sincerity, traits that made people love her. She was quick to empathize and got along with everyone. That's why those around her admired her. Well, almost everyone. "When you're done there, make me some juice. Same as always, orange, carrot, and ginger with a bit of lime juice and honey. Don't add ice. And hurry up," ordered a young woman who had just arrived, kicking off her heels right in front of the maid mopping the floor. Charo saw it happen and could only shake her head at the scene. The heels belonged to her son, Steve's fiancée, Andrea. After bossing around the maid, Andrea finally noticed Charo in the kitchen. Charo quickly turned away and focused on organizing the vegetables. Andrea strutted over to her with a wide grin, forcing Charo to respond with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Good morning, Auntie. What are you doing?" Andrea asked sweetly, but her smile faded as soon as she noticed a maid helping Charo in the kitchen. "Why are you helping her? That's not your job, Auntie. Why are you helping her?" Andrea said sharply. "I wasn't doing anything, dear," Charo replied, glancing toward the front door to see if Steve had arrived. "Where's my fiancée? You don't need to help her, Auntie. That's her job. That's why you pay her. To serve you," Andrea said with a smirk, turning and walking away. As Andrea settled onto the couch, Charo and the maid exchanged glances. Neither of them said a word, but it was clear they were both thinking the same thing. "What does Mr. Steve even see in her, ma'am? She's so unpleasant," whispered the maid. Charo agreed with a slow nod. "I don't know either," she admitted, just as Steve walked into the room. "The only reason he's dating her is because of business," Charo added, shaking her head. The truth was, Charo felt sorry for her son. She knew the real reason Steve was with Andrea. It was tied to the partnership between their families. If only their business could stand on its own, if only it hadn't been on the brink of collapse, she would never have allowed her only son to end up with a woman like Andrea. Steve had accepted the arrangement because he believed Andrea's family could help save their company from total ruin. One wrong move and everything his father built would be gone. One bad decision, and the legacy left to them would vanish. This was the only way. Even if marrying Andrea went against everything he wanted, he felt he had no choice. Meanwhile, the smile vanished from Bea's face the moment she heard from other vendors at the market that Grandma Desiree had been rushed to the hospital due to severe dizziness. She didn't know why, but a sudden wave of fear hit her. Because money had been tight lately, she couldn't deny that both she and her grandmother had forgotten to set aside anything for her medication. Grandma Desiree herself would always tell her to prioritize household expenses and only buy her maintenance meds if there was anything left. Since a typhoon had passed the week before, sales at the market had been even worse. As a result, they couldn't afford the medicine, which led to this. "Grandma!" Bea called out in a trembling voice as she and Gabby entered the hospital room. "Are you okay? Are you hurting anywhere else? Grandma, you're not planning to follow the light, are you?" Gabby asked, half jokingly. Grandma Desiree just glared at her. Even in that moment, Gabby's remark lightened the mood slightly. They couldn't help but laugh a little, especially when Grandma Desiree flicked Gabby on the forehead. "I just got dizzy. I'm not dying yet. You're so dramatic. Maybe you should go instead," Grandma quipped, then turned to Bea, who could only offer her a faint smile. "Let's go home, sweetheart. I don't want to stay in this hospital any longer. We can't afford it if we stay here too long," she said softly. Bea nodded. What happened to her grandmother made her realize something. No matter how hard she worked selling at the market, or how often she went door to door selling vegetables, it would never be enough. She would never be able to give her grandmother a better life this way. What she was doing, what they'd always done, simply wasn't enough. She needed to find another way, no matter what it took. Fate, it seemed, was already arranging something, because the next time she tried selling vegetables outside a hotel, she saw her again, the kind woman she hadn't run into for about a month now. Charo was visibly happy to see her, and she couldn't help but smile widely. "Oh, you're alone today?" Charo asked, as if she were looking around for Gabby. "You know, sweetie, it feels weird seeing you without your talkative friend. It's like my ears are finally getting some peace," Charo joked, making Bea laugh. "What are you doing here? Selling here now?" "Yes, ma'am. I really need to earn more. I have to save up money fast," Bea said sincerely, which immediately caught Charo's attention. "My grandma was just hospitalized, so I'm the only one selling now. My friend is at our market stall. She's the one manning our vegetable shop. Grandma's at home resting because the doctor said she needs time to recover." She explained all this while Charo nodded along quietly. It's hard to earn money at the market now. Even going door to door doesn't really help. Not many people are buying vegetables these days. I mean, who wants to eat veggies every day? She added, with a small laugh. Charo could only smile and shake her head. Admittedly, she felt a strange connection to the girl. She didn't know why, but there was something about Bea that just felt light. Bea was beautiful in her own way. That was one of the reasons Charo had noticed her to begin with. "You know how to clean a house, right?" Charo suddenly asked, making Bea look at her in confusion. "I need an extra housekeeper. Maybe you'd be interested?" "Wait, really?" Bea asked, her face lighting up with hope. The offer clearly excited her, and it showed on her face. Charo smiled. She knew it was a big deal for the girl, and even though she hadn't been sure if Bea would accept, she was happy to see the girl's reaction. But Bea's joy faded quickly as she remembered her grandma. If she worked as a housekeeper for Charo, who would look after Grandma Desiree? When she got home and told her grandma about the offer, her face was still filled with excitement, though it faded quickly with concern. "Don't worry about me, sweetheart. If you really want to work and save up to pay off our debts, you have every right to choose whatever path you need to," Grandma Desiree said softly after hearing the story. Bea's eyes lit up again, but when she saw her grandma's face, her expression softened. Desiree understood the unspoken question on her granddaughter's mind, and she sighed. Of course she wanted to support Bea in whatever direction she chose. She knew Bea was doing everything she could to lift them out of hardship. She trusted her. But even so, Désirée couldn't help the pang of sadness that followed. Who was she to stop her granddaughter from pursuing a better life, especially when they weren't even related by blood? The sadness in Désirée's eyes only disappeared when she turned to look at Bea and saw the same sadness mirrored in her granddaughter's face. "What about you, Grandma?" Bea asked, her voice laced with hesitation. "Who's going to take care of you if I leave? I don't want to leave you alone here. It's a different time now. It's hard to trust people these days. What if something happens to you while I'm away? Who's going to cook for you, take care of you when you're sick?" There was deep worry in her voice. Désirée heard every word and chuckled softly. Even if it didn't erase the worry in her own heart, it comforted her a little. "I can take care of myself, sweetheart. I'm sick, but I'm not dying. I'm just resting. I can still look after myself. Besides, Gabby will be around. If you really can't help but worry, just ask Gabby to watch over me so you won't have to think too much," she reassured her. "I'll be okay, even if Gabby isn't around. I'm used to being alone. You know that, sweetheart. Don't worry about me, okay? Whatever decision you make, I'll respect it. Just think of the opportunity being offered to you. Think about what you'll lose if you let it go," Désirée added. Bea could only pout sadly before leaning in to hug her grandma, who chuckled weakly. She didn't know why, but it was incredibly hard for her to even think about leaving her. Still, she couldn't deny that this opportunity meant everything to both of them. It could help them pay off their debts. It might even be a way for her to save for college. So even though it hurt, she chose the path that could help them both. Elsewhere. "Chairman, someone is asking to see you," his secretary said. Chairman Lewis turned away from the window at the sound of the door opening and closing. He wasn't surprised by the secretary's voice. "They've been waiting for you to finish your meeting with the investors. They said they'd like to speak with you in private," she added. The chairman let out a deep sigh and crossed his arms. "Let them in," he ordered. The secretary nodded and exited the room. Within 5 minutes, 2 men walked into Chairman Lewis's office. Both were formally dressed, holding documents required for the meeting. "Good morning, Chairman Lewis. We have some good news for you," said one of them. The chairman nodded. "We've located the woman who took in your granddaughter." "Now that's good news," the chairman responded, visibly revived by the report given by his private investigators. "Do everything you can to find her as soon as possible," he instructed. Both men nodded in reply. His granddaughter had been separated from him since she was a baby. After the car accident involving his son and daughter-in-law, no one had been able to find the baby that was with them. They never found her body, and Lewis had always believed someone took her in. Years had passed, but Chairman Lewis had never given up on searching for the one grandchild who survived the tragedy. He believed she was still alive, and that belief drove him to keep looking, even after all this time. He wanted to make it up to her for all the lost years. But how could he do that if he couldn't even find her? Fortunately, after years of investigating the accident, they had finally tracked down the woman who had adopted her. "Bea," a gentle voice called out from her side. She turned instinctively and smiled at the housekeeper, who had been accompanying her around Miss Charo's mansion that afternoon. She had just arrived at the address Charo had given her when they last met. As usual, Charo wasn't home, probably off on vacation again. The housekeeper had told her as much while showing her around the mansion. "I know you're probably tired from the trip, Bea. Ms. Charo herself told us not to assign you any tasks today. Don't worry, you're getting paid for today even if you don't work. She knows how exhausting it is to travel alone," the housekeeper explained, and Bea nodded quietly. The woman looked at her again and smiled softly, which Bea returned. "Oh, I'm Marjorie, by the way. I'm one of the housekeepers you'll be working with here. Don't be nervous. We've heard a lot about you from Ms. Charo already. She talks about you all the time, so we kind of know you already," she joked, making them both laugh. In less than 2 weeks of working at Charo's mansion, Bea had already gotten along with all the staff, especially Marjorie, who quickly became a friend. Sometimes, Charo would join them for small chats, and Bea realized that her first impression had been right. Charo was genuinely kind. "She's really a good woman," one housekeeper said, while organizing pantry supplies. Bea could only smile as she listened to the stories about Charo's kindness. If she has free time, she helps with chores around the mansion. She doesn't care if people ignore her, even that hypocrite fiancé of Mr. Steve. "Steve?" Bea asked, surprised. She'd been working in the mansion for 2 weeks, but hadn't met her actual employers yet. The housekeeper sighed and nodded. "Mr. Steve is kind too. You haven't seen him because he's always at work, especially now that he's been working overtime, trying to uncover a scandal in their company. Anyway, he's Ms. Charo's only child, and the chairman's too. Don't worry, just like Ms. Charo, Mr. Steve is also kind." "But his fiancée, she's a piece of work. Expect that she'll make things hard for you, especially since you're new." Bea nodded slowly, trying to hide her curiosity. If the fiancé was really as mean as they said, why did they even bother putting up with her? Just because she was engaged to the boss? Why would their employers even like someone like that? "Good morning, Marjorie," a man's voice said from behind Bea. She didn't know why, but her heart suddenly raced. It was the first time she had heard Mr. Steve's voice. Maybe that's why her pulse quickened. "Marjorie, once you're done wiping down here, please clean my room. Andrea is coming over later," he said, with little enthusiasm. Steve arched an eyebrow when the housekeeper didn't even glance at him. Assuming he wasn't heard, he sighed and walked up to the woman, placing a hand on her shoulder. Bea jumped and immediately stood up from the stool she'd been sitting on, turning to face the man. Her entire face flushed with heat as Steve frowned, clearly surprised to see a face he didn't recognize. "Who are you?" Steve asked, studying her from head to toe. "You're new. When did you start?" Bea nodded quickly, though she still felt her cheeks burning. "Almost 3 weeks ago, sir." Steve wanted to ask more, but then remembered that he had indeed been away from the house for 3 weeks due to work. The company had collapsed quickly over the last 6 months, and he couldn't pinpoint why. When his father passed away, Steve took over the business. At first, things went well, but then everything began to crumble. Despite his best efforts, working hard and hiring private investigators to uncover possible corruption, he still hadn't found the root cause. "Do you need anything else from me, sir?" Bea asked quietly, still looking down with a shy smile. "I'll take care of my room myself. Marjorie, once you're done here, please help Nora. Andrea is coming over," Steve replied. "But if you don't finish on time, I'll just ask Nora instead." "What's your name again? And how long have you been here?" "B. Grace Montemayor, sir," she replied. Steve looked her up and down for a few seconds before nodding and turning to leave. Later, when Marjorie heard what had happened, she let out a loud squeal. They were in the maid's quarters, getting ready for bed. Bea wouldn't be surprised if someone complained about how high-pitched Marjorie's squeal was. "Lower your voice," Bea scolded. "Some of them are already asleep," she added, frowning at her friend's grin. "You know, Bea, I've heard so many stories that start like that. And do you know how they usually end? The maid and the boss fall in love." Marjorie teased with a laugh. Bea just shook her head and smiled faintly. "But you and Mr. Steve, that's impossible. He already has a girlfriend." Instead of arguing, Bea just smiled again. She didn't come here to flirt. She came to work. There was no point playing around, especially when Mr. Steve was already in a relationship. She knew how to stay in her lane, and above all, she knew the meaning of self-respect. "B, I'm so glad we finally got to meet here at the house. said Ms. Charo warmly as she hugged Bea, whose face turned red with embarrassment, making Charo chuckle. She pulled back and looked at Bea from head to toe like a proud aunt. "They're not overworking you here, are they, dear?" "Oh, no, ma'am, not at all," Bea replied with a nervous laugh, prompting Charo to finally let go of her. Whether she admitted it or not, Bea couldn't deny that Charo had been kind to her. Strict sometimes, yes, but more often than not, she was light-hearted and playful with the staff. It was rare to see her frowning, and when she did, it usually had something to do with Steve's fiancée, Andrea. "Make me some juice," Andrea demanded, as soon as she flopped onto the couch in the living room. Marjorie was busy wiping the table nearby, while Bea remained in the kitchen peeling onions beside Charo, who was preparing beef stew. Through the window, they could see everything Andrea was doing. Charo frowned at the sight, which Bea couldn't help but notice. "Housekeeper!" Andrea called out again, her voice loud enough to echo through the living room. When Marjorie didn't respond, Andrea shot her a sharp glare. "Can't you hear me? I'm calling you, aren't I? Are you stupid or just deaf?" "Ma'am, can't you see I'm cleaning?" Marjorie responded calmly. Charo nearly laughed at the response and glanced at Bea, who tried to suppress a smile. Andrea, however, was unfazed. "I see you, and I don't care. You're a maid here. I have every right to order you around, even if you're in the middle of something. You're being paid to serve me. So go and get me a drink, just like you always do. Later." "I said now," Andrea snapped. Marjorie slammed the rag onto the table and stomped toward the kitchen to carry out the command. She continued muttering angrily as she entered the kitchen, where Charo and Bea were still working. Bea wanted to ask her what was wrong, but Charo subtly gestured for her not to. "Why is Mr. Steve's girlfriend like that, Ma'am?" Bea asked quietly, still watching Marjorie mix the juice. "Is that really how she is?" "Maybe, maybe not. I'm not sure, dear, but that's how she's always been since Steve brought her here. But don't worry, you're not the only one confused. Even we can't understand why Steve is with her. Honestly, she's nothing like the kind of woman he usually likes. Steve prefers simple women, good people. Rich or not, character matters most to him. Andrea is aggressive, snobbish, and worst of all, high maintenance. Almost none of my staff here are spared from her disrespect. She walks in and acts like she owns the place. If she wants something, she demands it immediately. She's such a diva," Charo added, with a disappointed shake of her head. Bea winced. She always thought that being rich meant you could control everything, that you could get whatever you wanted if you had money. She never expected that even wealthy people had these kinds of problems. Money wasn't their issue, it was the people around them. "There's just one thing I'm going to ask of you, dear," Charo said, making Bea look up at her again. "When that brat is here, don't follow her every command. No matter how nicely she asks, don't. I'm telling you this because I care. There's no one else you should take orders from in this house, besides me and my son. Don't listen to Andrea. She'll only make your life harder." Bea nodded quietly. "Let Marjorie and Nora do whatever she says. They're used to her attitude," Charo added, then turned to her again. "Follow what I say, okay? I don't want to see you becoming a slave to that woman. Understand, Bea?" "Yes, ma'am," Bea answered as they continued cooking. She understood why Charo was saying all this. She was just trying to protect her from Andrea, whose bad behavior had become well known in the house. The real question in Bea's mind was, how long could she actually ignore Andrea's commands? "Are you deaf?" Andrea snapped. She had called Bea multiple times and given her orders, but instead of responding, Bea continued cleaning the pool. Charo and the other maids had gone out to the market and had no idea Andrea would be dropping by, which was why Bea had been left at the mansion alone. She was simply following Charo's instructions not to obey Andrea's orders. But now Andrea was fuming. "You're new here and already acting like this?" Andrea shouted. Still, Bea kept cleaning, choosing to ignore her. That only added fuel to Andrea's fury. "When I speak, you listen!" Andrea yelled as she snatched the pool skimmer out of Bea's hands and threw it into the water. Bea flinched and instinctively stepped back, stunned by the aggressive act. Andrea's face was twisted in irritation, and it was clear that she was losing her patience with being ignored. "What exactly are you being paid for, huh? So why aren't you doing your job properly?" Andrea yelled again. She couldn't understand her own anger, but something about Bea's calm defiance infuriated her. Andrea had always gotten her way. She wasn't used to being ignored, especially not by a maid, and not in a house that would soon be hers. "I've been calling you," she screamed again. "Ma'am, I'm still finishing my task," Bea replied, trying to keep her voice respectful. Andrea's smirk deepened. "The juice can wait. Could you stop making excuses, idiot?" Andrea cut her off, and Bea's mouth shut tight. She didn't know why, but hearing Andrea call her that made something inside her twist. No one had ever dared speak to her like that. "When I tell you to do something, you do it. Understand me?" Andrea said as she started walking toward Bea. Bea began to step backward with each stride Andrea took. Andrea's eyes were dark and fixed on her. Fear crept in. They were alone. If Andrea did anything, who would Bea turn to? "Ma'am, I'm not even done yet," she murmured nervously. Andrea's eyebrow shot up. "You're not the one paying my salary," Bea added carefully. "You said I'm being paid, so shouldn't I follow the one who's really paying me? You're just a guest here." "What did you say?" Andrea said coldly. "You're talking back to me now?" she hissed as she grabbed Bea by the collar. Bea's eyes widened in shock, and then, with a hard shove, Andrea pushed her into the pool. Never, never in her life had Bea imagined their argument would come to this. First, she had spoken respectfully. She simply asked if she could finish her task first. Second, she didn't even know how to swim. She flailed in the water, legs kicking, trying desperately to stay afloat. As Bea sank, unable to swim, it finally dawned on Andrea that the girl couldn't float. Panic flashed across her face. She was about to jump in when, a splash, someone else had jumped in from the far side of the pool. Struggling from lack of air, Bea was about to give up. Her movements slowed. Hope was slipping. But then, someone grabbed her arm and pulled her up. She broke the surface with a gasp, finally breathing again. "Are you okay?" Steve asked as he supported her. Bea turned to him, dazed, and their faces accidentally bumped. His lips grazed her forehead. She flushed. Steve didn't notice it. Bea, still flustered from his worried gaze, nodded rapidly. He helped her out of the pool. Andrea could only stare at them. She'd be lying if she said she wasn't afraid. What if Bea had drowned? What if she had actually killed someone? What would happen to her and her father if she were arrested? "Are you out of your mind, Andrea?" Steve yelled. They were now in the living room. Bea sat on the couch, wrapped tightly in a white towel, while Steve paced furiously. Andrea sat on the opposite side, frozen, eyes unfocused. "I didn't know you were this immature. I let you come here because I trusted you to behave around the staff. But it turns out you came here just to torment them. I didn't know you were this kind of person. You did all this just because someone didn't follow your order. You hurt Bea." "Do you even think before you act?" Steve snapped. Andrea slowly stood up. "Why are you angrier than I am, Steve?" she challenged. "Which one of us is your girlfriend?" "You're defending that maid like she's the one you're dating." "Don't throw those lines at me, Andrea," Steve said sharply, turning to face her. I'm not defending her because I'm in love with her. I'm calling you out because you're wrong. You could have seriously hurt her. What if she had died? Have you ever considered the consequences before you do these things? Still, Andrea didn't answer. She sulked and returned to her seat, arms crossed. Her face showed frustration, especially when she glanced at Bea, who remained silent, clutching the towel around her tightly. Her pale face revealed everything. Andrea could only sigh in irritation. Acting like she almost died, she muttered under her breath, which Steve clearly heard. He was about to speak again when footsteps approached from the entrance. They didn't need to guess. Charo and the rest of the staff had just returned from the market. "It's so hot outside," Charo exclaimed as she entered the hallway. But she stopped in her tracks when she saw Bea, drenched and wrapped in a towel, and Steve with a scowl on his face. Andrea, meanwhile, looked irritated as ever. "What happened to you all?" Charo asked. Before she could say more, Andrea stood up and rushed toward her, nearly crying as she hugged her tightly. Charo, startled by the gesture, simply raised an eyebrow. Steve remained still, watching. "What happened, dear?" Charo asked, as Andrea clung to her. Andrea began sobbing against her shoulder. "Did something happen?" "It's Steve, ma'am," Andrea whimpered like a child. "He yelled at me." "How could I not yell at you, Andrea?" Steve snapped, stepping forward. "You pushed Bea into the pool. She doesn't even know how to swim, and you threw her in like it was nothing. Were you even thinking? Do you know what could have happened to her? You could have killed someone. Do you know what kind of consequences that brings? You could go to jail for that. And then you come running to my mum, acting like you're the victim here." "Enough," Charo said, pulling away from Andrea's hug and turning towards Steve and Bea. "You pushed Bea into the pool?" "It was an accident, Auntie." Before Andrea could finish, Charo stepped away and walked over to Bea, who was still seated. She sat beside her and gently touched Bea's arms and shoulders, checking for injuries. Bea was surprised by the gesture, especially when she felt the woman's gentle concern. "Are you all right, sweetheart? Did she hurt you?" Charo asked softly. Even though she could feel Andrea's piercing glare from across the room, Bea turned to Charo, and despite her hesitation, she nodded slowly. "I'm all right, ma'am," she said. "It was an accident. Ma'am Andrea was just trying to help me clean the pool earlier. I told her I didn't need help, and that's when I slipped and fell by accident." She lied. Steve let out a disappointed sigh and walked out of the room. Charo sighed deeply. She could sense that Bea wasn't telling the truth, especially since Steve had likely heard what actually happened. But with Bea's words now spoken aloud, she had no choice but to go along with it. Later, as Marjorie helped Bea back to the maid's quarters so she could change into dry clothes, the truth was clear between them. "You lied, didn't you?" Marjorie asked. "Ma'am Charo knows Andrea's true colors, Bea. If you're just trying to cover for her, it's a waste of time. And you know she's not going to stop just because you defended her. That woman won't let up." "We know her, Bea. Even if we weren't there earlier, we all know exactly what she's capable of," Marjorie added. Bea gave her a faint smile. "That's enough. I just want Ma'am Andrea to know that I'm not an enemy in this house." "Pfft," Marjorie scoffed, clearly unconvinced. "She's twisted, Bea. Believe me. And even after what you just did for her, she's only going to play with you more, especially now that it looks like Steve is siding with you." Bea said nothing. There was nothing else to say. Even if Andrea hated her, she'd just let it go. If Andrea was angry that Bea didn't follow her orders, then so be it. After all, it wasn't her decision to disobey, it was Charo's. She could have thrown Charo under the bus, but she didn't. She didn't want to ruin the relationship between Charo and Andrea, especially now that there was talk of a future marriage. "I can't believe you defended her instead of me, Steve," Andrea said angrily as she and Steve spoke privately in his room. Steve simply let out a long sigh. That only fueled Andrea's irritation. "You defend her like you have feelings for her. Do you love that maid? Are you going to choose her over me?" she snapped. "I'm correcting you because you're in the wrong, Andrea," Steve replied, adjusting his tie. "Just think about what would have happened if you had killed her. Do you think my father would be proud of you?" "I don't care," Andrea yelled. Steve sighed again. "The fact that you're more upset about me correcting you than you are about your own behavior says a lot. I'm not mad because you corrected me. I'm mad because you're taking her side. That means something's going on between you two." "Enough, Andrea," Steve said sharply. Andrea turned to him, shocked. "Can you, for once, stop jumping to conclusions? I've already told you what you did was wrong. If you interpret that as me picking sides, that's on you. If you're offended by the truth, that's not my fault. I'm trying to help you see your mistake." He turned to leave, but Andrea's voice stopped him. "I'm leaving," she said firmly, causing Steve to stop in his tracks. "And I'm going to tell my father everything you said to me earlier. I'm calling off the wedding. Let's see which company crashes and burns when this engagement falls apart." Steve turned around and looked at her. Just like always, Andrea was smirking, knowing full well that the engagement was her leverage. She knew Steve only agreed to marry her to save his failing company. If she and her father walked away, that company would fall apart, and she used that as her blackmail card to keep Steve in line. "Well," she challenged, "choose her or this wedding, which could save your parents' company." Steve exhaled slowly and shook his head. He knew how to run the company. In fact, the success they'd had before was thanks to his late father's diligence and leadership. But since Steve took over, everything had declined. He didn't even know where he went wrong. He'd worked hard. He'd given it his all. So why was it all falling apart? "I know someone stealing from the company, sir," an employee had confided in him the previous week. "I just need more evidence. But once I find something concrete, I'll bring it straight to you." Steve had sighed at the time, but the words stayed with him. He didn't want to believe it, but it was starting to seem like the traitor was inside the company. He had been a good boss, a good leader, but instead of loyalty, he was being repaid with betrayal. "Sir!" came a voice calling him. Steve gently set down his coffee cup on the table before turning to see Bea, who had just arrived. He wasn't surprised to find her there, and he could tell she looked concerned. They were by the poolside. Steve had been quietly reflecting on everything, his conversation with the employee, the investigation, the internal theft, when Bea's voice broke through his thoughts. "What is it, Bea?" he asked. She let out a soft sigh and took a seat in the chair across from him. He noticed it and glanced over at her. "Have you and Mom Andrea made up?" she asked, keeping her head down. Steve frowned. "I'm sorry, sir, if you and she fought because of me. I really didn't mean to fall in the pool. And honestly, believe it or not, it was just an accident. Mom Andrea was being kind, trying to help me. I was the one who told her I didn't need help, and then I slipped." "But you know, Bea," Steve interrupted her gently, causing her to pause mid-sentence. "What I can't stand is someone who breaks my trust, someone who's clearly being mistreated and still defends the person hurting them," he said firmly. Bea felt a sting of embarrassment. Her cheeks flushed. She bowed her head even lower. "It's not that she started, but Steve cut her off again. "I know what really happened, Bea. You don't need to cover for Andrea." He looked at her seriously. "You don't know her like I do. But I do. Next time she does something like that to you, can you please tell me? I don't tolerate those kinds of actions, Bea. If you think you can convince people with made-up stories about Andrea, you're wrong. We already know her, Steve added. Are you mad at me for what I did? Bea asked quietly, causing Steve to look over at her. I just thought, maybe if I admitted what really happened, things would only get worse. You might end up fighting more because of me. You didn't do anything wrong, Bea. Andrea is the problem, not you, he assured her, making her lower her head even more. I just want you to promise me something, Steve continued. Next time, don't keep it a secret. If she hurts you, tell my mom. Tell me, so I can defend you, so I can talk to her properly. He turned away, gazing out over the pool. Bea could only nod, cheeks still flushed. Steve sighed deeply as he laid back on the sun lounger. His mind was still racing with everything, the theft in the company, the betrayal, and now the growing desire to find out who was responsible. Once he found the culprit, he wouldn't hesitate to bring them down, no matter who they were. Charo, I believe this is her, said the man as he handed over a photograph to Charo. She looked at it intently, her expression growing serious as she studied the face in the picture. I'm sure of it. That's her. That's the woman who adopted the chairman's granddaughter? Yes, the man replied. We're still confirming it, but based on the name and other details, she's the one. Charo didn't respond right away. She continued to stare at the photo. She looks kind, she murmured. She seems like she would take good care of a child. She did, the man said softly. According to our investigation, the child was raised well. She's still with her to this day. Charo looked up at him. You're telling me she's been with that woman all this time? Yes, Mom. That woman raised her as her own daughter. Charo's throat tightened. It was the same girl who had come to her house weeks ago, looking for a job, the one who now worked as a housekeeper, the same girl she had grown fond of in such a short time. She was the missing granddaughter of Chairman Lewis. I need you to keep this to yourself for now, Charo said firmly. Don't tell the chairman yet. I'll be the one to do it once I'm certain. I want to speak with the girl myself first. Of course, ma'am. The man nodded. Charo looked down at the photo again and sighed. Her hand trembled slightly as she set it down. She didn't know why, but her heart ached. Maybe it was because she knew what was coming. If this turned out to be true, everything would change. You wanted to talk to me, Mom? Bea asked as she stood nervously in front of Charo's office. She had been summoned that afternoon while sorting laundry with Marjorie. Charo gestured for her to come in, and Bea stepped inside quietly, clutching her hands together in front of her. Come, sit, Charo said softly, her voice more serious than usual. Bea obeyed and sat down across from her at the desk. There was a pause, an odd silence between them that hadn't been there before. Are you okay, Mom? Bea asked gently, noticing the change in Charo's demeanor. Charo smiled faintly. I just need to ask you a few things, sweetheart. Please answer me truthfully. Bea nodded slowly. What's your full name? Charo asked. Bea tilted her head slightly, surprised by the question. Bea Grace Montemayor, she answered. Montemayor, Charo repeated softly. That's the name of the woman who raised you? Bea's forehead furrowed. She nodded again. She's my grandma, Desiree Montemayor. She raised me since I was a baby. And your parents? I don't know them. Grandma said they died when I was still an infant. We've been together ever since, just the two of us. Charo's chest tightened. Do you have any memory at all of them? She asked carefully. None, ma'am. Grandma said there was an accident, a car crash. That's all I know. I've never asked too many questions. Why not? I didn't want to upset her. She gets emotional every time the topic comes up, so I learned to let it go. I figured if she wanted to tell me more, she would. I trusted that. Charo leaned back in her chair, exhaling deeply. Sweetheart, she began, pausing. I need to ask you one more thing. Bea straightened, sensing the weight of what was coming. Were you adopted? Bea hesitated. I don't know, she whispered. I never asked. Grandma has always treated me like her own. She never made me feel different. I never felt the need to ask. Charo nodded slowly, then stood from her seat. She walked around the desk and sat beside Bea on the couch. She reached out, gently taking the girl's hand. Bea, would you be willing to take a DNA test? Bea's eyes widened in shock. Ma'am, she said, her voice shaking. Charo smiled gently. There's something I need to confirm. I know this might sound strange and I don't want to scare you. I just need to be sure. Will you agree to it? Bea hesitated but eventually nodded. If it will help you, ma'am, I trust you. Charo's eyes welled up with tears as she squeezed Bea's hand. Thank you, sweetheart. That means more to me than you know. Charo, what's this all about? Chairman Lewis asked, adjusting his reading glasses as he glanced at the sealed envelope on the table. He had just arrived at the mansion after Charo called, saying she had something important to tell him. He hadn't expected her to bring him a DNA test result. You're scaring me, he added, picking up the envelope and staring at it. Charo sat across from him, her hands neatly folded in her lap. Her face was calm, but her eyes were clouded with emotion. I need you to open that, sir, she said gently. Everything will be clearer once you read it. Chairman Lewis slowly opened the envelope and pulled out the sheet of paper inside. His eyes scanned the contents. The moment he saw the names printed on the document, his hands began to tremble. B. Grace Montemayor, he read aloud, and then his voice caught. There it was, in bold letters. Relationship, grandparent, grandchild, probability of relationship, 99.99%. His vision blurred. He placed the document down carefully on the table, then looked up at Charo. She's my granddaughter, he whispered. Charo nodded slowly. She's the daughter of your son and daughter-in-law, the baby who went missing after the accident. She survived, Chairman, and she's here. She's been with us this whole time. Chairman Lewis covered his face with his hands. His body shook as the emotion overwhelmed him. All those years of searching, all those prayers, she was alive. My son's child, my only grandchild, she's been alive this whole time. He choked out. Charo moved closer and gently placed a hand on his shoulder. I've been taking care of her, sir. She's a good girl, kind, hard-working, respectful. I didn't know at first, but the more I got to know her, the more I felt it. She looks like your daughter-in-law. She carries herself with grace, just like her mother. Chairman Lewis looked at her, tears now openly falling down his cheeks. I want to see her, he said quietly. Please, take me to her. Charo smiled and stood. She's in the garden, sir. Come with me. Bea turned toward the sound of approaching footsteps. She had been tending to the small garden Charo maintained at the back of the mansion, pulling out weeds and arranging flower pots. She stood up quickly when she saw Charo entering the garden, accompanied by an older man she didn't recognize. B, Charo called gently. Yes, Mom? Bea responded, wiping her hands on her apron. I want you to meet someone, Charo said, her voice quieter than usual. The man beside her stepped forward, his gaze fixed on Bea, as though seeing something precious for the first time in years. This is Chairman Lewis. Bea's eyes widened. She had heard of him, of course. Steve's grandfather, the powerful figure behind the company. She quickly bowed her head in respect. It's an honor to meet you, sir, she said politely. But the man didn't speak right away. He just stared at her, as if in a trance. His lips trembled, and his hands clenched at his sides. B, he finally said, his voice shaking. Do you know who I am? Bea blinked, startled. I only know that you're the chairman, sir, she replied, confused. Chairman Lewis nodded slowly, struggling to find his words. I'm your grandfather, he whispered. Bea froze. She thought she must have misheard him. I've been searching for you for years, since the accident, since my son and daughter-in-law, since we lost them. You were the only one we couldn't find, but I knew. I always believed you were alive. She stared at him, her mouth slightly open, eyes wide in disbelief. No, she whispered, that's not possible. But Charo stepped forward and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. It's true, sweetheart, she said softly. We ran a DNA test. Everything matched. You're his granddaughter. You're part of their family. Bea stumbled backward, overwhelmed. I don't understand. My grandma, Desiree, she raised me. She told me my parents died in an accident, but she never said anything else. She must have found you after the accident, Charo explained, and she chose to raise you herself, out of love. Chairman Lewis took another step closer, tears in his eyes. I owe her everything, he said. She saved you, kept you safe, but now I want to make things right. I want to bring you home. I am home, Bea said suddenly, her voice small but firm. I don't know you. I don't know anything about this. I need time. Of course, Chairman Lewis replied immediately. Take all the time you need. I just wanted you to know the truth. And to know I never stopped looking for you. With that, he turned and walked away slowly, leaving Bea standing motionless in the middle of the garden, the weight of the truth sinking heavily into her chest. You knew? Desiree looked up from the couch where she was folding clothes. Her hands paused as she saw Bea standing in the doorway, her face pale and unreadable. You knew who I really was, and you never told me? The old woman slowly set down the towel she had been folding and sighed deeply. I didn't think it mattered anymore, Desiree replied gently. What difference would it have made? I would have known the truth, Bea cried out, her voice cracking. I wouldn't have gone through life wondering why I never had a father or a mother. I wouldn't have believed I was just some orphan who didn't belong anywhere. Desiree's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't speak. You had no right to keep that from me, Bea whispered. I raised you, Desiree finally said, her voice trembling. I gave you everything I had. I loved you like my own. But I'm not your own, Bea said bitterly. I never said that. But you let me believe it. Desiree stood up slowly and walked toward her. I didn't know how to tell you, she said. When I found you after the crash, you were just a baby. Your parents, they didn't survive. I tried to look for your relatives, but by the time I figured out who you were, years had passed. I was afraid that if I told you, you'd leave, that I'd lose you. Bea looked away, her jaw tightening. And now what? She asked. What do I do now, Grandma? Do I go with them? Pretend they're my family after all these years? You don't have to do anything you don't want to, Desiree said softly. But they're your blood. That doesn't change. Bea didn't answer. She just stood there, her arms folded tightly across her chest, trying to hold herself together. I need some air, she finally said, turning and walking out of the house. Desiree watched her go, her heart aching. She had always known this day would come. Grandpa, Steve said as he entered the study and found Chairman Lewis sitting silently by the window. He turned, his expression weary but softened. Yes, Steve? I heard about Bea, Steve said cautiously. I just wanted to say, I'm happy for you. I know you've been searching for her for so long. The old man smiled faintly. Thank you. It still feels surreal, he replied. After all these years? But she doesn't want anything to do with us, at least not yet. Steve nodded slowly. I understand. She's overwhelmed. She needs time. She said she's not ready. She said she doesn't feel like she belongs, Chairman Lewis added, more to himself than anyone else. Steve walked closer. She's been living her whole life thinking she was someone else. Then suddenly everything changes. I don't blame her. His grandfather looked at him carefully. I want to give her everything, Steve. Not just money, not just a house, but a name, a family, a future. I know, Grandpa. I want her to have what's rightfully hers. I want to correct the past, but I'm afraid if I push too hard, I'll lose her again. Steve placed a hand on his shoulder. Then don't push. Just be here. Let her come to you. She'll come around. Chairman Lewis let out a long, trembling sigh. I hope you're right. I'm leaving, Andrea declared coldly as she stood in the doorway of the mansion's living room, suitcase in hand. Charo looked up from her seat, unsurprised. All right, she said simply, setting her teacup down. Andrea blinked. That's it? She asked, clearly expecting resistance. What else do you want me to say? Charo replied calmly. You've made your decision. I'm not going to stop you. Andrea scoffed and rolled her eyes. I hope you realize what this means for your son. I do, Charo answered. And so does he. Andrea narrowed her eyes. Do you think I won't tell my father everything? Do you think I won't destroy what's left of your company? If that's what you want to do, go ahead, Charo said firmly, but don't think it'll make you the victim. Andrea's mouth opened, but no words came. You brought this upon yourself, Charo continued, and if you're still trying to blame B for your actions, then maybe it's best that you're leaving. I see, Andrea muttered bitterly. You're all taking her side. No, Charo said, standing up. We're taking the side of what's right. With one last glare, Andrea stormed out of the house, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. The door slammed behind her. Charo sighed and shook her head, then walked toward the window. When Steve was speaking with B by the garden, there was a peace in the girl's presence, a quiet strength that Charo had seen from the beginning. She knew the girl would heal, and she knew Steve already saw what everyone else was beginning to see, too. You're quiet today, Steve said, glancing at B as they walked side by side along the garden path. The breeze was gentle, and the sunlight filtered softly through the trees. It was late afternoon, and everything around them felt calm, except for the storm inside B. I'm just thinking, she replied softly. Steve waited patiently, giving her space to speak if she chose to. It's all so much, she finally said. Finding out who I really am, what my family is. It's overwhelming. Steve nodded. I can imagine. B turned to him. I'm scared, she admitted. Of what? That I'll forget who I am, she whispered. That if I step into that world, the world of your family, I'll lose the person I was raised to be. You won't, Steve said firmly. You're still you, B. No one can change that unless you let them. She looked down at her hands. I don't even know what they expect from me. They don't expect anything, Steve said. My grandfather just wants you to know you're not alone, that you have a place with us if you want it. And you? She asked, eyes searching his. Steve was silent for a moment. I want you to be happy, he said quietly. Whatever that means, if you want to leave and never look back, I'll understand. B smiled faintly. But if you choose to stay, he added, I'll be right here. They walked in silence again, but this time it wasn't uncomfortable. B looked up at the sky, the clouds drifting lazily above them. For the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of peace. Maybe the path ahead wouldn't be so frightening after all. It had been a week since Bea learned the truth, She still hadn't given Chairman Lewis an answer. She hadn't accepted his offer to move in or to take back the name that was rightfully hers, but she hadn't rejected him either. She was still thinking, still trying to find the balance between the life she knew and the one that had suddenly been placed before her. "Your grandpa sent this," Marjorie said with a smile as she handed Bea a small envelope while they were folding clothes in the laundry room. Bea accepted it, her brow furrowing. Inside was a letter, handwritten in neat cursive, and a small photograph. It was old, slightly faded, a picture of a young man and woman holding a baby between them. Her parents. She traced the edges of the photo with her fingers, her throat tightening. The letter was simple. It didn't beg or pressure. It only shared memories of her father as a boy, of her mother's laughter, of the day she was born. Tears welled in Bea's eyes. For the first time, she felt something more than shock and confusion. She felt connection. Later that night, she sat outside the staff quarters, staring up at the stars. Steve found her there and sat beside her without saying a word. She handed him the photo, and he studied it quietly before giving it back. "I think I'm ready," she said softly. Steve looked at her, waiting. To meet them, to be part of their world. Maybe not all at once, but I'm ready to try. Steve smiled. "They'll be happy to hear that." "I'm still scared," she added. "You don't have to be," he said gently. "You're not alone anymore." Bea looked at him and smiled back. No, she wasn't. "You look beautiful," Charo said with a proud smile as she adjusted the sash over Bea's shoulder. The young woman stood in front of the mirror, wearing a soft blue dress that complemented her graceful frame. Her hair was neatly styled, her makeup simple yet elegant. Bea smiled shyly. "Thank you, ma'am." "No more, ma'am, remember?" Charo reminded her. "You're family now." Bea nodded slowly, still getting used to the warmth that came with belonging. It had taken time. Weeks of careful conversations, quiet dinners, and gradual trust. But now she was starting to feel it, that maybe she truly had a place among them. Downstairs, the garden was glowing with string lights. Tonight was a small welcome dinner that Chairman Lewis had arranged, just for close family and a few of their most trusted employees. It wasn't a grand party, it was more of a quiet celebration, a new beginning. "Are you nervous?" Charo asked. "A little," Bea admitted, "but also excited." Charo smiled again and gave her arm a gentle squeeze. "You've come so far, sweetheart. You deserve this." Together, they descended the staircase and stepped into the backyard, where Steve and Chairman Lewis were already waiting. Steve turned first and smiled at the sight of her. Chairman Lewis's eyes sparkled with emotion as he opened his arms. Bea stepped into his embrace without hesitation. "Welcome home," he whispered. The lights twinkled above them, and for the first time in a long, long while, Bea truly felt at home.